Dreams don't come true. They are true.
And so we have a very special guest today to talk to us about that. Gregg Levoy has been a journalist and a writer. He's spoken at all kinds of conferences, business conferences, management conferences. He's written a couple of books. You see his bio in the Pulse. He's going to do a workshop for us this afternoon, which you're going to want to attend. He has books out there for you to take home. But it is truly my pleasure to invite you into living your authentic life by paying attention to the vital signs life is giving you. So please welcome Gregg Levoy.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you again for that marvelous song. Beautiful. And thank you to the musicians, generally, wherever they are. Okay. Oh, I love this. Because I sometimes talk with like 200 miles an hour with gusts up to 300. Okay. All right, I'm going to jump right in. When I was in college, I learned a critical lesson about human nature, and a lesson that has everything to do with the work that I do today. And I learned this in a psychology class because in the middle of the semester, the students in the class pulled a prank on the professor. And it was based on what he was teaching us at that point, which is called classical conditioning. All right? So most people know about this through the experiment using the famous Pavlov's dogs.
Yes.
Right? Ring a bell?
Yes.
Well, they were taught to salivate at the sound of a bell.
Right.
And I read recently that Pavlov's dogs is also the name of a perfume, which I think is hysterical. It has all sorts of interesting implications, especially for the men folk. So this is what we did. We took advantage of the professor's habit of pacing back and forth in front of the lecture hall when he delivered his lectures. So what we devised is that whenever he paced over toward the windows, we very subtly pretended to be bored. Okay? So we slouched, and we fidgeted, and we doodled, and we stared blankly into outer space, which actually by mid-semester, turned out some of us were pretty accomplished at it. And whenever we paced over toward the door, again, very subtly, we now pretended to be interested. Okay? So we sat up a little bit straighter, we took notes, fixed in with keen scholarly expression. And by the time that day's class was over, we had our psychology professor glued to the door. It was singularly the highlight of my college years. And I half expected that when the bell rang at the end of class, he would begin to visibly salivate or something. But what I saw in that experiment, I think I had intuited for much of my life, but I'd never seen it demonstrated, which is how incredibly easy it is to condition a human being, to steer them from the outside. And by extension, of course, to be conditioned. And without a word being spoken, not a word. The entire experiment was conducted in pantomime. And I figure if it took us, 50 minutes to condition our psychology professor, with a new set of behaviors, new direction in life, if you will, I tried to imagine the effect on me of a lifetime's worth of that kind of conditioning. By the time I was at that point 18. So I mean the thousands upon thousands of messages that every one of us got while we were growing up, spoken and unspoken, and then effectively instructed us in the rules of the game. What dreams are and are not bankable, what is and isn't possible, how are you supposed to behave in public, what is the reigning definition of success in the culture, what are you personally capable of? All right? In other words, who pulls the strings in this game and who dances? And I think the cumulative effect of a lifetime's worth of that kind of conditioning forms effectively a kind of hypnosis. You know, it's, I don't even think it matters whether the messages you get are negative or positive. It's a kind of hypnosis. And I think that every kind of human community, families, schools, corporations, religious communities, just society at large, they all pass along the message that conformity is rewarded. Failure to conform is punished. It's really, in a sense, it's a holdover from natural law, really, because what natural law tells us is those who leave the herd to go their merry way have a tendency to get eaten. You know, I mean, it's more complicated in the human arena, but I think the warning stands, the admonition stands. And, you know, even though culture itself would not exist without the glue of conformity, I just think that the individuals in it can tend to pay a pretty steep price for it, right? And one of the prices that we can pay is losing a working familiarity with who we really are at any point in time, individually as well as collectively, a sense of who we are. So, when I think of the notion of a calling, so what is calling? Let me see that. Calling. Interesting, okay. I love it. It's like, sort of like an Italian word that means something really different. But I think that it cuts through a lot of this conditioning because it emanates from the part of each one of us that knows what it knows. You know? That knows where other people leave off and where we start. And at a very early age. I've got a friend in California who told me about an interaction she had with her 5-year-old daughter, who, her name is Janaea, who apparently wanted to do something mommy didn't think advisable. And so she says, Janaea, honey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. To which Janaea replied, with absolute innocence and certainty, but mommy, you're not me. I mean, we knew where that line was at 5 years old.
Right.
Right? Calls emanate from the part of us that knows, I think, the feel of integrity in our lives and the feel of its absence. And I don't mean integrity as a moral issue. I mean it as a psychological issue. You know? And I think it emanates from the part of us that knows what kinds of decisions it's going to take to make our own lives literally come true. Right? What kind of decisions it's going to take. So, frankly, my opinion is that the great vocational question is not what should I do with my life? Or what do I want to be when I grow up? I'm amazed how many grown-ups my own age continually say, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And the great vocational question is certainly not what major should I declare. All right? It's who am I? That's my sense. Who am I should say. What is my true nature as distinct from everybody else's? As distinct from the furry warmth of the herd? You know? What is my true nature? And who I am changes over time. And so, I believe, will the calls that come through the being that's being called. That's my sense. So, the kind of authenticity that I'm referring to when I talk about callings, I don't actually think is something people need to discover or figure out, go on a pilgrimage to find out, as much as I think it's something that we often need to simply remember. So remember and religion both mean exactly the same thing, which is to reconnect. All right? And what I mean is that it's often something we already know, or knew once and then forgot. All right? I ran across a college biology textbook years ago, and while I was researching the Callings book, and there was a passage in there that just rang out at me, and it was a description of what happens in a fertilized human egg. And what it said is that as the cells in a fertilized human egg grow and develop, really early on in that process, these little indentations appear in the round cell ball that begin the process of distinguishing one side of you from the head from the hindquarters. A distinction that seems to be lost entirely on some people. 40 years after they're fertilized. So what it said is that if you were to take a cell at that point in the game and mechanically move it down from the head to the hindquarters, what would happen is it would migrate back up. And this is what the book said, because the cell knows what it's supposed to become. So you can imagine how that might strike me doing a research for a book on following your callings. We know what we're supposed to become, and at a cellular level. In fact, anymore, when I hear people use this kind of language, I feel it in my cells, I feel it in my bones, I feel it in my gut, in the very fiber of my being. Anymore, I think they're talking literally. There's a guy that I included in the book, an artist who lives out in Santa Cruz named Howard Ikamoto. And he described an interaction he had with a 7-year-old daughter one day. She came to him and asked him what he did at work. And he says, well, honey, my job is I work at the college, and my job is to teach people how to draw. And he said that she looked back at him incredulous and said, Daddy, you mean they forget? Imagine how that would seem to a 7-year-old child, that anybody could forget how to draw. It's like forgetting how to dream or something. But the fact is we do forget. And as for how we go about remembering what we already know, let me share this. I did one of my callings weekend workshops at a conference center in Massachusetts called the Rowe Conference Center, Western Mass. And I get to the front desk on the Friday afternoon it starts, and I find out that there's one other workshop also being conducted at the conference center, same weekend as mine, and that one was on the subject of tracking. And I was thrilled by this because it seemed to me that the two workshops that weekend, that conference center, were about the exact same subject, and that is the search for signs. In their case, indicating the presence of animals. In our case, the presence of callings, right? So I got a chance to talk to those people all weekend because we shared meals in the dining hall. And what jumped out at me about that bunch was how incredibly excited they were just about the signs of the animals. Not even the animals themselves. Frankly, they never saw the damn animals all weekend. The middle of winter in Western Massachusetts, they never saw them. I've never, however, seen a group of grown-ups and professional people so excited about the subject of poop in my entire life. It's pretty much all they talked about, including at the dinner table. And the reason I'm mentioning that is, well, I've always wanted to say the word poop in church. Now I've said it twice. Normally I would be sent out of the room at this point, but this is a thrill for me that I'm not. No, I'm sharing it because it was inspiring to me. And I shared it with the people in my workshop by way of saying that if we could cultivate that quality of excitement and enthusiasm just about the signs of the animals, not even the animals themselves, our lives will reveal things to us that they're not going to reveal if we are not interested. You know what I'm saying? They're just not going to give up their secrets if we don't offer them some genuinely devoted curiosity. And I think it's fair to say that animal tracks are like signs of pretty much any kind, in the sense that they lead to something. All right? They lead to something. So there's a wonderful book, if you ever get a chance to read, it's called The Tracker, by a guy named Tom Brown. And ostensibly this is a book about animal tracking, but the bookstores typically put it in the spiritual section. And there's a beautiful passage in there where he says, a track is the end of a string. At the far end, a being is moving. A mystery that leaves itself like a trail of breadcrumbs And by the time your mind has eaten its way to the maker of the tracks, the mystery is inside.
Wow.
Isn't that just a beautiful description of what the spiritual community is called discernment? I just love that. In fact, when I was interviewing people for the Callings book, one of the things that jumped out at me about these people were how many of them, the vast majority, how many of them told me that they had a practice of some kind. And the whole point of it was to strike up a conversation with the maker of the tracks. All right? So this is a self-reflective practice. Some kind of self-reflective practice. And nothing extravagant. Daily journaling, meditation, for some people therapy is a self-reflective practice. Artwork done in the service of self-discovery as opposed to just exhibition. Dream interpretation was really popular. Regular short retreats. Regular intimate conversation about things that are close to the heart. Or your participation in pretty much any kind of group whose members get together for the primary purpose of waking up. Right? So, women's groups, men's groups, spiritual groups, mastermind groups, personal boards of advisors, even 12-step groups, really. Here's a complete non sequitur. The Vital Signs book that came out a couple of years ago, there's a section in there where I talk about talkaholism. And a guy that I interviewed for that section swore that there's a 12-step group for talkaholics. And he said it's called On and On Anonymous. So one of the things these dialoguing practices can help you do is, not only answer the great vocational question, but avoid what the mythologist Joseph Campbell called the great sacrilege in terms of the soul's integrity. That's his language, which is what he called inadvertence. The great sacrilege in terms of the soul's integrity is not paying attention.
Yes.
Bumbling along, stumbling along, not having the receivers turned on. Okay? And it can also help you see that there's, this kind of dialoguing practice, that there's not just one calling in there. Contrary to what some of us learn in, say, Catholic school, about there being one singular vocation per person, per lifetime, and your job is to figure that out before the curtain comes down. Rather what people have shared with me is that they have multiple calls. How many of you guys have had a sense in the course of your life that you've got more than one call going on, right? Most of you. Because there's vocational calls, but there's also relationship calls, and lifestyle calls, moral calls, service calls, spiritual calls. The ones you got when you were, let's say, 20. Aren't they really different than the ones you're getting at 40? Different than the ones you're going to get at 60 or 75? There's that developmental arc, once again. In fact, I've seen this happen. People wait and wait and wait for the great big calling. You know what I'm saying? The burning bush, the bony finger of God. And they miss all the smaller ones that are right at their feet, honestly. And I think of those as the fire drills for the bigger ones. It was Wallace Stevens, a poet named Wallace Stevens, who once said, and this really captures this idea, he said, I don't ask for the full ringing of the bell. I don't ask for a clap of thunder. A scrawny cry will do. Which I love. To me, that's the beating heart of discernment, the scrawny cries approach, because calls come in a really impressive variety of forms. And it pays to kind of post sentries at these various gates to get them when they're coming through. All right? Calls come as intuitions. An intuition is a little calling. All right? They come as gifts and passions and dreams. Oh my God. All the religions of the world seem to agree on this. Dreams are one of the primary channels through which the gods and the goddesses talk to the mortals. You know? Who was it? Remember Tom Robbins, the novelist Tom Robbins? Another roadside attraction, even cowgirls get the blues, all those wonderful novels. He once said, dreams don't come true. They are true. When we talk about our dreams coming true, he said, we're actually talking about our ambitions, which is a whole different story. And I ran across an amazing study out of Johns Hopkins University. I saw it in Time magazine about 10, 11 years ago that corroborates this idea. It was a study of pregnant women. And they found that of the women who had an intuition about the sex, the gender of their baby, they were correct 71% of the time, which I thought was impressive all by itself. Of the women who had a dream about the gender of their child, they were correct 100% of the time. Wow. This is a Johns Hopkins study. What does that say? We've got access to really deep knowledge in there, and we're sleeping through it. So calls come also as things like, and this is the level at which I encourage people to look at it, and will be in the workshop this afternoon too. This is the level. Calls come as things like song lyrics you can't get out of your head for weeks. Any of you guys ever heard of a novelist named Ann Tyler? She wrote a book called The Accidental Tourist, which a lot of us have seen, a movie with William Hurt in it. And she's a brilliant observer of couple dynamics. She says, I can always tell what my husband is really thinking by the tunes that he absent-mindedly hums in the car. So gentlemen, take note. Because I'm in the mood for love is really different than, tied to the whipping post. So, and the first time I noticed this in my own life, the thing about the song lyrics, I was about to quit my job as a reporter to be a freelancer out of frustration and desperation. And for a couple of weeks, right around that period of time, I kept hearing one line from The Wizard of Oz, day and night. If I only had a brain. And of course, what it's telling me is I'm not thinking it through. Right? That's a call. That's the level at which they come. They come as things like a decision that needs to be made in your life now. Not backburnered for another 6 months or another year or another decade. You know what I'm saying? Some issue that's hanging over your head, waiting for resolution. That's a call, right? Where is there friction in your life? That's another form. Where is there friction? Because it's like in the natural world. Friction occurs where changes are trying to take place. Where does passion rub up against security? Primary drama in people's relationship to their sense of vitality and calling. Passion versus security. Where does that rub? Where does head argue with heart all the time? Where do you fight with people? What are you fighting for or about? You know what I'm saying? So where is there friction? They definitely come through the body. I mean, I have a whole chapter in the Callings book called The Language of the Body, because the word symptom means a sign. That's the etymology of the word. It means a sign of what? The word pathology means the logic of pain. What's the logic? Right? I interviewed a guy for that chapter named Arnold Mindell. He started something called process-oriented psychology, and he said something which at the time was kind of stunning to me. He said, symptoms are usually dreams trying to come true. Think about that. Symptoms are usually dreams trying to come true. So I really chewed on that for a while, and a week later, I'm at a writers' conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I get an object lesson in that comment. After my presentation, I'm out in the lobby, chatting with people, signing books, that kind of thing. Woman walks up to me, out of the crowd, a complete stranger to me, and says, one of those things people will not typically say to you unless they're pretty sure they're never going to see you again. She said, hey, you know I'm so fat, Not a question you're supposed to answer. And then she answers it. She says, it's because I have so many stories inside of me that I'm not writing down. That was her remark. And I'll tell you, there is no science or philosophy I know of that could dispute a self-diagnosis delivered with that kind of certainty. You know what I mean? The woman knew her body was trying to tell her something. She knew exactly what it was. I need to be writing and I'm not writing. All right? She knew that her symptom, in the sense that it was a sign, meant something, and she knew exactly what it was. It was really, in a sense, the mark of Jonah. It was the mark of Jonah. It was the evidence of her flight from a calling. And one, as she put it, that's literally pushing out from inside of me. You know? Here's the thing. Whatever passions, sense of purpose, sense of direction, sense of vitality is in there and being sat on is not going to go away. Okay? Just because the human psyche is like the earth. It's a closed system in the sense that there's no away, as in running away. There's no out, as in throwing the garbage out. You know what I mean? There's no trash icon up here. Whatever you push down, we push down, is going to come up someplace else in the system. That's just the way it works. In fact, here's a beautiful description of systems theory. You know, the notion that everything's hitched to everything else. I ran across a Mexican poet some years ago named Jose Frias. And he said, I tried to drown my sorrows with drink, but the damn things learned how to swim. I mean, a more elegant description of systems theory I haven't run across. So, one more thing and then I'll wind up. So I used to be a reporter, and one of the papers that I worked for regularly was the Cincinnati Enquirer. And one of my favorite stories that I wrote in all the years that I was there was a story about the circus coming to town. Okay, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus. And I went down to the train station because they travel around the country, used to travel around the country on a train. And in a fit of journalistic zeal, and therefore short-sightedness, I let the animal trainer of Ringling Brothers convince me that riding bareback on an elephant at the head of the Barnum and Bailey Circus parade through downtown Cincinnati would add color to my story. So, contrary to my Jungle Book fantasy about how this was going to look, which was that I was going to be airlifted onto the elephant's back by standing on his trunk, this is the image that I had in my mind. And the only way to get up there was to actually use a ladder, plain old aluminum ladder. And the only way to stay up there during the parade was to hang on to the elephant's ears. Okay? So, those of you who have ridden bareback on elephants, you probably know about this already, but elephant ears have this really unpleasant habit of flapping a lot. And especially when they're hot. And it was midsummer, and you know, we're talking elephant ear flapping. This is not like kitty cat twitching. You know? And so the only way to stay up there during the parade was to remain extremely flappable. Really. Otherwise, I'd have been thrown. And it was 12 or 15 feet to the ground, okay? Concern that, frankly, to be honest, paled in comparison to my fear about how stupid I looked up there. Because I was wearing my business clothes, for one thing. But only because he sprung this brilliant idea on me at the last second. And I said yes. So I'm wearing my business clothes. My pants are scrunched up above my knees with the black socks. It was just a fashion tragedy. And you have to picture, too, I'm the first thing anybody sees in this parade. And I'm pretty sure I did not capture the theme of the show. You know, Ringling Brothers, the greatest show on earth. Pretty sure I captured another one of P.T. Barnum's famous themes. There's a sucker born every day. I think I got that one. But in looking back on that experience, and on what I have learned since then about what is involved in following a call, that experience has a lot in common with the experience of following a call, in that I was caught by surprise and carried off by something way bigger than me, all right? It was thrilling and nerve-wracking simultaneously, and in that the elephant couldn't have cared less. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I've discovered a fairly unsettling truth, which is that my soul doesn't seem to care what price I have to pay to follow my calls. I hate this. This seems like a design flaw to me, frankly. But my happiness, my security, my vanity, my popularity don't seem to matter to it. It's not interested in making me rich or famous. It's not interested in whether I live a comfortable life. It's not even interested in whether people like me or not. But what does seem to matter, and this has been borne out many times over the years, what does seem to matter is hanging on to the elephant. Yes. And being willing to go where the elephant goes. You know what I'm saying? The willingness to go for the big ride, in other words. The one that ensures that someday, if your life happens to flash in front of your eyes, at the very least it will hold your interest.
Right.
You know? That much at least. Or somebody else's life won't flash in front of your eyes. John Wayne or somebody, you know. At least it will hold your interest. So in the spirit of helping it to do that, I just want to say that the workshop this afternoon is a very hands-on opportunity. This is not lecture format. This is participatory. Opportunity to explore what your own life is calling for from you. And the operative question will be, what is trying to emerge right now in your life? What's trying to emerge? What's knocking on the door for an entrance cue? So I hope you'll come. And thank you so much, and Petra, thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm going to just ask Greg, make sure at your workshop you tell your USA Today story. Okay? Because, you know, one of the things about signs that is so amazing is how often we don't pay attention to them. And then they get bigger and louder. You know, the universal 2x4. We should all give up needing to have a universal 2x4 as a sign. Don't you think? I think we should pray about that. So let us pray. So as we go within together, just taking a moment, we take that centering breath that brings us in and pours us out into the infinite. Remembering that there is that one infinite reality, the one love and life that is moving in through and as all of creation. Every life, everywhere, the same life. My life, your life, the life of all beings. And what I know is that life reveals itself, emerges through each one of us uniquely, preciously, and perfectly. And so this morning, let us collectively affirm that we feel the impress of our soul. We listen to the guidance of our intuition. That we allow Spirit to move through us. Let us release the fears, the old ideas, desires that keep us small. This morning I affirm and declare that each one of us finds that elephant to ride, and we ride it no matter what, because that is who we came here to be. Our full, authentic, bright, shining selves. So grateful for all the support that we get in this from each other, from our community, from from our families and friends, from life itself. In that gratitude, we simply accept the call. We let it be, and we say together, and so it is.